All right, welcome everybody to LGBTQ&A 2023. This year we're focusing on allyship and parenting. If you're joining us online, let us know if you have any questions that are technical. Just put them in as questions. So if you can't hear or if you can't see, let us know and we'll get that amended as quickly as possible. My name is Monet Booker. I'm an EDI advisor here at Lancaster University, and my pronouns are she, they, and I am wearing a blue blazer, pink top, and purple trousers today. I'm going to hand over to Anne-Marie to give introductions to the entire panel in just a moment. They're all going to be introducing themselves this way, and this is so that we can create an inclusive environment for all of our attendees online. Just as a quick brief, the way that this event is going to run is once we are done with introductions, we'll go into the questions portion of the event. We're going to first focus on allyship, and then we're going to talk about parents and carers after that. We'll be taking a few pre-submitted questions to begin with on each of those themes, and then after that, we'll open it up to the live questions as well. For attendees in the room, if you need some time or space, we do have 2 comfort rooms upstairs. If you need to use those at any point, please come find me. I will be right there, and I can let you into those. So I'm going to hand over to the lovely Anne-Marie now. All right.
Thank you. Obviously a very popular event. I'm being blocked out of the lobby. Anyway, it is my pleasure to be able to welcome you and join with Monet in welcoming you here, colleagues and those online from Lancaster University and also the University of Cumbria. My name is Anne-Marie Houghton. My pronouns are she, her. I am an ageing woman with greying hair, and I'm sitting in a wheelchair because I am a wheelchair user. I'm also the university's Dean for Equality, Diversity and Inclusion, but I happen also to teach in our Educational Research Department and work in our Educational Development Unit, which works with colleagues across the university on teaching and learning. And I have the opportunity in my role as Dean to be able to work closely with students and many staff and students across the university. I'm going to invite our colleagues, and I think we'll start first with our visitors from the University of Cumbria. If I could invite you first of all to move along the line, and I'll start with you, Jo. Welcome.
Hello, thank you. I'm Jo Scott, she, her pronouns. I'm wearing an orange shirt. My role within the university is that I am on the LGBT staff network, and that is my interest with today, but I am also the programme leader for the Integrated Foundation year.
I am Annabelle Robinson and my pronouns are she, they, and I'm the Welfare Officer for the University of Cumbria Students' Union, and today I am wearing a black proud pride shirt and a rainbow lanyard.
Hi, I'm Brian Webster Henderson. I'm the Deputy Vice-Chancellor at the University of Cumbria. My pronouns are he, him. I'm a Professor of Nursing by background. I'm wearing an aqua jumper and glasses of some description, green and round.
Some description.
I do think what was it wearing?
Indeed. So I'll hand over now to my Lancaster colleagues, starting with Victoria.
Hello, I'm Victoria Simpson. My pronouns are she, her. I'm a member of the LGBTQ&A+ ally network here at Lancaster, and I'm also here as a parent to an LGBTQ child. And I'm Caucasian. I have long, straight, blonde hair, and I'm wearing a white t-shirt.
Hello, my name is Hannah Rosbrook-Brown. I am an EDI advisor at Lancaster University. I'm here as an EDI representative, but also with a personal interest in LGBT staff network and the Allies network. I have pale pink short hair. I'm wearing a white shirt and pink trousers.
Hello everyone, my name is Josh. My pronouns are he, him. I'm the LGBT+ Liberation and Campaigns Officer at the Students' Union. I'm wearing a purple jumper and I think I look good in it.
Yep.
I think I would agree. I should also have said that I'm a member of an ally supporter of the LGBT staff network, and I also am a member of our LGBTQIA+ Allyship network, which is spread right across the university. and as something that we were able to establish during the time of that dreaded word COVID and the pandemic. So I think that that's really been a network that's grown and is supporting everybody, which is very fitting because it leads us nicely into some of our allyship related questions. So I'm going to start off, if I might, with thinking in terms of allyship. I'm going to slightly reverse the situation. I'm going to ask, first of all, if we could have some information from Joe and from Josh about there's often a fear of saying something wrong. What advice would you give to the panel to give to someone to overcome how they address a situation where they are fearful of saying the wrong thing? So I'll start with yourself, Joe.
No problem. My opinion on this is often that if we approach it with compassion, we're coming about it the right way. So if we are being caring and listening to what has been said to us, that even if it is a challenging situation, that we might be in fear of saying something wrong, that when we're in that place and therefore involved in that conversation, we're more likely to come out of it with a positive outcome, even if something might go wrong within that. And then after it, more importantly, it's to reflect and to educate yourself from that as well, and then to move forward after you're able to do so.
Okay, thank you for that, Joe. Josh?
Absolutely, I would agree with that as well. And I think sort of adding to the reflection part, it's very important that you sort of educate yourself further. You shouldn't solely rely on an individual experience to educate yourself and an individual queer person to educate you on that. It's about actively engaging with the queer community and the people who are comfortable in educating you and asking them the questions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm going to move to Hannah now, if I might. In terms of often, as well as saying the wrong thing, people also have an issue about the challenge of concerns about pronouns. What guidance would you say is available for those working with students who prefer challenging pronouns, e.g. pronouns which may be perhaps oppressive against another minority group?
Yeah, so as a university, we hopefully are very aware that people choose to use pronouns that work best for them, that they feel most comfortable with. Sometimes that can mean that people use things called neo-pronouns or adopt alternative pronouns that are not within our standard vocabulary of he, she, he, her, she, her, he, him, she, her, they, them. So where people do choose to use other vocabulary or pronouns outside of that, I think the important thing is about listening to the people who are choosing those pronouns, understand what the purpose is behind those, speak with that person and have a discussion with them. If the pronouns themselves you're not sure of or you think might be, as was asked, potentially offensive to other minorities or other groups, or indeed any labels that they use for themselves, then it's worth having a conversation with them about the language and make sure that they understand where that's coming from, you understand where that language is coming from, and whether you yourself feel comfortable using that language as well. It's very much a two-way street, that people have their preferred pronouns, or the pronouns that they use for themselves rather than preferred. They are their pronouns. But also is the understanding from the other person in that conversation on how best to adapt those pronouns and use them.
Thank you, Hannah. Anyone want to add anything to that?
Can I just add a comment, because I absolutely agree with Hannah, but I think I'm an old gay man. I'm heading towards the end of my career, and society has changed quite a lot from the time when I found the courage to come out as being gay, and probably LG, even B was a challenge at that time, and now we have networks of LGBTQ+A. There's a responsibility, I think, on all of us to educate ourselves and to show respect and compassion for colleagues, students, members of society who might choose different pronouns that we're not familiar with. And I don't think it's acceptable just to say I'm not aware or to ignore it. I think there's a responsibility for us to educate. And as a university, I think universities have a responsibility to educate and induct staff as they come into their organisation around pronouns going forward.
Thank you, Brian. Those of you watching may have noticed that I've been passing my computer. There's no point pretending I haven't been passing it. I have. We've now sorted, I hope, the technical challenges, and so I shall now breathe easy. And we shall, just a reminder to everybody that if there's any questions from those online that they wish to ask, that they're very welcome to post those into the chat, and we'll be looking at those in terms of what people are doing. I've also been asked if I could invite our speakers to make sure that they are projecting so that their voice is being heard over the microphone. So thank you for that. And apologies for anyone who's missed anything at the very beginning, but hopefully it wasn't too painful. Okay, so I'm going to try and see if I've not had an opportunity to involve some of the people so far. So I think we'll move to Victoria. And I think perhaps just before Victoria, we move to the question about Brianna, which you kindly said you would answer. We'd said in our meeting that we'd just spend a moment thinking about Brianna, a case that's obviously in the news at the moment, their family, but also the other people and families who have been affected by LGBT homophobia and also LGBT discrimination of whatever sort. So we'll just take a moment to think of those people, and then we'll move on with our questions. Thank you. So Victoria, I wonder if you could perhaps offer some advice to a worried parent who wants to be able to encourage their child to be themselves.
Yeah, I think the reason why I wanted to answer this question was because it's a question I've been asking myself this week as a parent of an LGBTQ child. I think it's easy to get caught up in that worry and think, you know, do I encourage my child to fit in a bit more so that they're not opening themselves up to bullying, to harassment? I think many parents of LGBTQ children will know that it almost feels like worrying is a default setting. Sometimes you're sending your kid to school and you're hoping that they've had a good day every single time. So I think ultimately for me it's a question of whether you give in to that fear or you know, step away from that and really kind of encourage your child to be themselves. I think I can't control the hate that my child is likely to receive as they grow up, but I can control or help prevent hate that's directed towards themselves. I can encourage self-love, and I think my piece of advice would be to focus on that, really, to focus on loving themselves, so that it almost doesn't matter whether other people don't love them or like them. So basically to be your child's number one cheerleader, really, and not give in to the fear. So there's a really great passage in this book. I found What's the Tea by Juno Dawson really helpful. There's advice in there for parents. And Juno, as a trans woman, mentions that it's important to not give in to fear, but also to be mindful. So we can be pragmatic about it, about safety, but also not to kind of hide away in the shadows, and not to encourage our children to hide away in the shadows. So yeah, that would be my advice, and that's kind of my thoughts this week, really.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that, Victoria. And I think, yes, that's self-love for the person for themselves, but also, as you said, number one, cheerleader, and actually love of parents, where you're in a position to be able to do that. Is there anybody else who wants to add anything to that particular question? Please do.
Thank you.
Yes.
I would definitely agree with everything you said there. I have a twin brother who is trans, So I've sort of grown up with him and his experience of the world. And having a parent who was worrying but supportive would have been very beneficial to him. And I think it's about empowering your kid to be them, because trying to make them not outwardly queer, not outwardly gay, not outwardly trans can be more damaging as well. And you need to provide a safe space for them. If the world is hurtful to them, having a place at home where they can be themselves is very important, and they'll definitely remember that for the rest of their lives. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. Okay, so again, an encouragement, if there are any online questions, please do post those and then we'll add them. I'm pleased to say we've still got some more having been submitted here. So I'm going to move now to... Right, so yes, we'll... Yes, I think we're new to the university, Brian, and I wonder if you could give an overview of some of the support that's already available. And is there anything that you're striving to add to in the future?
Yeah, so at the University of Cumbria, I was instrumental in setting up the Staff LGBTQ+ network. And what we felt was really important to us was to empower staff to help shape positions in areas in the university where there was not enough voice or not enough policy or not enough outward-facing messages around what it's like to be a member of staff or an ally in the LGBTQ+ community. So along with my colleague Lee, we have developed a series of equality statements, inclusivity statements. We're very visible in the university now. We've grown from a very small group of about 13 to about 60 plus in the network. I think as a university we've got a lot to do around policies that make our staff feel safe, and there's quite a lot to do, I think, around psychological comfort and combating psychological aggression. By that I'm meaning not the overt challenges to members of the LGBTQ+ community, but the ones that are quite hidden, but are quite impactful on people's lives in a negative way. So there's much to do, I think, around culture of inclusivity. You have to have policies to build on and stand on, but I think our next step in working with our allies is to create a culture of inclusivity where people are free to be themselves. My comment earlier was around education and pronouns, and I think that is a part of it, but it's not the only part. I still get messages from staff or students who tell me they're terrified to come out in their staff team because they think they'll be rejected. Or people who are questioning their sexuality don't know where to go for that support. And the last thing I want to say is go to the HR department. I want people who are compassionate. We've identified people on all of our campuses that people can go for just for a chat, for a coffee, to be themselves and not be politically correct, but question what's inside their head and their heart and have a safe environment to do that. That for me has to be a next step forward for us, certainly as a university, on our kind of developing agenda.
Thank you, Brian. I'll perhaps come back in a moment, maybe for one or two examples of some of those psychologically damaging, subtle sort of illustrations, and perhaps from anybody in the panel. But Hannah, anything from Lancaster's perspective?
Yeah, so Lancaster University have, similar to University of Cumbria, we've had an established LGBT staff network, and alongside that we also have an LGBT allies network. Those are for our staff members, and then on the student side we have our LGBTQ Students Forum in LUSU. So we do try and create those spaces for our staff, our students, the people within our community to ask the questions that they might want to ask, to find the support, but also to find the various things like policies and procedures and systems, where sometimes it's really hard navigating a university, particularly as a new staff member, trying to find the area that you can find that support. That's where these networks come in, and the forums within the Students' Union. The Students' Union also have two officers this year for LGBT, as well as a wide range of other staff members within there as well. We're joined by some in the room today. So if you're a student, I would encourage you to go speak to the Students' Union. They're a fantastic place of resource for you. If you're a staff member, get in touch with either the staff networks, ask around your department and find out who else might be feeling the same way, might have similar experiences, if you're comfortable doing that, obviously. And if you are really, really struggling, then you can contact the EDI team, just straight edi@lancaster.ac.uk, drop us a message, and we'll help you out. We'll have a meet up with you, we'll have a chat, we'll have a coffee, and help you find that support system and that sort of network to help you out as you go.
Thank you, Hannah. So can I come back to you, Brian? One or two examples, and I think I asked perhaps for those, and there may be others who want to offer for one or two as well, simply because I think sometimes people don't even realise sometimes the things that they're saying that are having potentially damaging and sort of impact on people.
So for me, psychological safety is a really important fact of any culture or organisation. And my experience is that people tend to unknowingly make comments or avoid including people in conversations that can be quite hurtful to the person who's LGBTQ+. Sometimes it can be quite overt. And in my own career, I've had very overt examples where people have negatively said things to me publicly in a meeting or in a forum where you might not be able to answer back. And that's just inappropriate. But for me, it's around those psychological safety elements where you need to make people feel included without unwittingly challenging a statement or position. I can think of a couple of staff examples where people have been in meetings and maybe a comment out of ignorance has been made about LGBTQ+ community or issues or things that are topical in the news, and then people might laugh and joke, and the person themselves is left thinking, do I challenge this? Do I say this? It might expose me. It's not what we want in a university environment. It's not what we want as part of our culture. So we need to create cultures where people are mindful of inclusion and are mindful. I'm going to talk even louder now the screen's cut. Are mindful of the environments in which they work and which they operate. And I think that's a really important part. The only other thing I'd say, Anne-Marie, is working with the Students' Union and with Annabelle is really important, that we actually get the student perspective and that we work together in partnership. And at the University of Cumbria, we've been really lucky for the last few years that we've had sabbatical officers who either identify as allies or part of the LGBT community plus themselves, and on their manifestos they've really pushed forward LGBTQ+ issues. So working in partnership with the Students' Union is absolutely crucial so that it's done as a cultural, harmonious approach.
Thank you for that. And I think, that you made 2 points there. I think one is when comments are made in a situation where somebody doesn't feel they can respond, and that can be very frustrating, because actually not only are you having to deal with the fact that it's not appropriate or you don't feel you can respond, and then you've got to deal with the fact afterwards that you didn't respond when actually it would have been, it would have been perhaps a way of dealing with it. But as you also say, it's sometimes that thing that people are saying, and it's the laughter or it's the unknowing the impact that it perhaps will be having.
Can I
Josh,
just add to that? Thank
of course
you.
you can.
I just like to add, I know there can be cases where people don't feel like they sort of can speak up in a situation. And I just want to speak about students. If there are any students who have been in that situation, your student union is there to empower you and support you. Yeah. If you feel like you can't speak up in a situation, we will speak for you. We have a wonderful Luso Advice service, which is also a third-party hate crime reporting centre. And they're absolutely empowering. And as a coalition, I found the student union incredibly helpful for situations like that, and I would imagine sort of the staff network have, other procedures in place as well to do that. Yeah, thank you very much.
And actually, if I could also add in myself, at Lancaster, we're just about to relaunch an anti-harassment and bullying team, and that will be an informal team for staff and students, which will give people to be able to be that first point of contact. And I would also say that people can perhaps also use anonymous forms of feedback if they feel that that's a way they want to get that message across. The key thing I would say in using an anonymous form of feedback is that if you do that, at the other end, nobody will be able to come and support you individually. So if you do raise an issue in Lancaster, it will be through uni apps, then it may well be, we've got a removal of a bus, which is great. It would be the opportunity that actually, so in terms of uni app, somebody might not be able to come and help you, but do make sure that you get support for yourself, because there's no point anybody carrying these sorts of things around with them. Okay. I'll take Hannah, and then I'm going to move us to our final ally question before we move back to parents.
And mine is very much about the ally side of it as well. Having active allies within your team is the most crucial thing for a lot of new staff, whether that's LGBT allies, disability allies, someone who's going to speak up about anything that is said that might make you feel uncomfortable. Allyship is so, so important. And being able to, from external to that situation, maybe give someone a look across the room, say like, you don't need to carry on talking, you can stop now. And then checking in on that person afterwards as well that might have been affected, and just making sure that they are okay. And if they need that support, if they need help speaking to somebody, whether it's a line manager, whether it's the EDI team, the network, HR, whatever it is, maybe just the person who's made a slip up in their words, then that's where those allies come into it. And it is so, so important. It's very easy for people to label themselves as an ally without necessarily acting upon that and doing anything about it. Being an ally is being there to support the people who are being disadvantaged by just being themselves.
Thank you, Hannah. I'm going to move now to Annabelle in terms of thinking about what makes, or have you got any tips perhaps for being an effective ally?
I can see the most important thing to be an effective ally is to educate yourselves and learn, because it's okay to not know the answers, but there's amazing resources available on the Student Hub at Cumbria and through our LGBTQ+ network and through Stonewalls, for example. And it's also a really helpful tip is to share your pronouns in everything you do. For example, pronoun badges which are available through Cumbria Students' Union, and I believe LUSU do the same here at Lancaster.
She says, modelling hers.
And in email signatures, and when you introduce yourself to others, to create an inclusive environment for everyone to be involved.
Thank you, Annabelle. Josh,
Thank
any
you.
tips for yourself?
My top tip would be to be loud and to stand up for the queer community. A lot of the time as queer people, it can get exhausting constantly having to justify your existence, your rights, and to be included. And as an ally, using your voice is extremely helpful. Turning up to pride events, turning up to protests around rights, and being there to support us actively is one of the most incredible ways that you can be an ally to our community.
Thank you. Any other allied tips? If not, I shall. Oh, yes.
It just to add on to Annabelle's point a little bit as well. It's amazing that what the small things can do. As Annabelle mentioned about email signatures, and I was just going back to Brian's point on psychological safety. My student groups have come back to me about the fact that they saw my email signature before they started that said I was a member of the LGBT+ staff network, my pronouns were on it, all of these kinds of bits of information, and they felt, well, I'm going to be okay in that class, I'll be able to be supported, I can say what I want to say. So even if it's just a small thing that's being put out there, you don't necessarily always know the impact that it has straight away, but it's worth doing it just for those people that might feel like they can't express themselves otherwise. So I think that's a good part of being an ally.
I think so, and I think perhaps I'd also maybe add in is that element that when we are being allies, and I like to consider myself as an ally, that actually it's about being like, it's about that challenging, but it's also challenging people in a respectful way, which I know we would all do, because actually sometimes people are doing these things unintentionally and a lack of awareness, and as Annabelle said, perhaps a lack of not being very well educated about the topic. So this is an opportunity to continue that dialogue and to open that up. If we in a sense shut them down, we need to obviously manage the situation, but if we shut them down, then in a way we're not then keeping that conversation open and actually helping to challenge and create a better culture. I don't know if anyone wants to come back on me on that, but that would be a particular thought.
I live in Cumbria now, but my home is Edinburgh, and I've got a very strong network of friends, and most of them would identify as allies rather than LGBTQ+, and they'll often say, what's the best thing to do? They don't work in my environment, but I want them to be able to challenge openly, as Josh said, to speak out when they hear things in the environment that they work against the LGBTQ+ community. I don't want them to come back and say, oh, I heard something awful today, because my first question would be, so what did you do? How did you address that? And so we'll often have discussions about it. I want them to be educated to know that as a friend and one of the allies, is my expectation is that they will speak out, because that could have been me in that environment, but it was someone else. And I think I've got a good collection of friends who I know would do that now, but that maybe wasn't the position, maybe 10, 12 years ago, but it certainly is now.
Yeah, and I think if I think of my own friends who are gay, thinking about them when one is challenging, even if one doesn't know the other person in the situation that you're witnessing, actually remembering your friends and knowing, well, if it was them sitting there, you would, there would be no hesitation. So I think, that is a part of a mechanism we can use to help us if we're feeling shy. We shouldn't be. So I'm going to move on to another aspect of allyship. We're going to move on to our parents and carers strand of our meeting now. And so just really thinking in terms of how can a parent demonstrate allyship for their child? And we've already had perhaps a little bit of an insight into that, Victoria, but perhaps you'd like to say a little bit more.
Yeah, I think this can be answered in two ways, depending on whether you are trying to be a role model to your children or whether you have LGBTQ children and you're wanting to support them as an ally. So I would say the first thing, I have 3 children. One is autistic but cisgender, another cisgender child, and then Albie, who identifies as non-binary. And so the main thing is we keep family discussions going. We talk about things, but it's a two-way process. So I learn from my children and they learn from me. So we have lots of books. There's some brilliant resources out there, some great picture books. I've discovered various radical bookstores that are often not-for-profit, and they have tons of resources and amazing books. Stick them on your bookshelf. And they're just a great way to start discussions. And then I guess it's important that I demonstrate allyship, and that's, Anne-Marie mentioned being shy. I'm a naturally quite shy person, but this is, as a panel speaker today, it's something I wanted to do, even though it's way out of my comfort zone, because it's something I feel really strongly about, and that's my way of demonstrating to my kids that it's important to stand up and speak out as an ally. I think Hannah said, it's not a label you wear, it's you really need to act on that and actually do something. And then in terms of being an ally to my youngest child, who's non-binary, I think Josh mentioned it, it's about providing that safe space. So at home we have a completely zero tolerance policy of anybody bringing anything negative into that space. That really needs to be a really safe space for my child to express themselves in whatever way they want to, and that might mean I have to challenge family members or friends, and that can be uncomfortable, but it needs to be that way. And then listening. So I'm cisgender, I'm heterosexual, so I don't understand, I'm never going to understand the difficulties that my youngest child does face. And so I need to listen. I need to really listen to what they need, not just assume that I know best, especially as a parent, because maybe I don't. So sometimes, you know, they'll come home from school and they'll have had a tricky day, and my first reaction is I want to go in and talk to the teachers. But once I start actually listening, it might be that they don't want me to do that. And it's important that the first thing I do is actually listen to what my child needs. So, yeah.
Yes, listening, we of course have hopefully 2 ears, and we can listen, and we should listen in lots of situations, because of course what your child has to say you're listening to, but somebody else's child might say something quite different. And so it's actually ensuring that we're actually listening to what people say, rather than what we think they're saying, or perhaps somebody else has heard. Jo?
Yeah, as a parent as well myself, I'm trying to instill allyship at home, and I would echo a lot of things that Victoria said, but also just nothing is off the table for discussion. You know what I mean? I'd like them to feel safe to bring anything. So even if they had heard something that's maybe against some of the values that we've kind of instilled, I would like them to bring it up so that we can talk it through. And if I don't know the answer, we say, let's look it up together, let's find out, let's get better educated about that then, and kind of just go on it as a bit of a journey together, really. And just if we can keep that conversation going now, mine is still quite young, but as they sort of progress through, hopefully then they'll feel supported in that way and be able to support others because we've looked into it, they know more about it and can be good allies out in their own communities as well. I also totally recommend the reading. There's some amazing books and we've just always had them around and that kind of option for them as well. And I think that's a good way of bringing it into the home, definitely.
And just in terms of both Lancaster and Cumbria, are there particular, does your network promote the particular reading lists, or have you got a sort of, or is that something that you could perhaps think about doing? Annabelle's nodding, so tell us more, Annabelle.
Yes, we do, and I'm really proud that the work with the staff network and also the Students' Union with the library, we have Reading for Good within our library and book lists and constantly our students and staff can request books. Forgot the name of the scheme, but request a book scheme is what I'm going to call it. And our library's always looking to develop books, and recently our LGBTQ+ staff network started a book club, which is a valuable asset for our staff. And during Pride Month in the past, on student request, the Students' Union have done similar, but it's what our members want and need at the time.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that, Annabelle. And Lancaster?
Yeah, from Lancaster perspective, very, very similar. We work closely between the networks that we have, the forums that we have, and the library services for the most part of that, sort of making media available and book lists. We have libcals online that are created for recognition months and awareness weeks. So there isn't currently a libcal online for LGBT plus History Month. We also regularly have displays, and it is upfront and visual and visible in the library as well. So if you went into Lancaster Library at any point today, you'd spot right in front of you a fantastic display, which we've borrowed a few books from today for our quiet room upstairs, on all things LGBT throughout the month. And then they've got a children's corner full of children's books. And again, similar, you can request books, and if you think something is missing from the collection, let the library know and they will see about getting it in for you. And that goes as well for online resources. We know that not everybody is on campus, and similarly for University of Cumbria, particularly with your multiple campuses, getting information across all campuses. There are online resources as well. Speak to your networks, speak to the students' unions, and they'll see about you getting all of those help, support, ideas, reading lists, colourful picture books. Everyone needs one once in a while. They'll see how you can get help for them and get access to them.
If you don't ask, you won't receive. So I would encourage, it sounds both Cumbria and at Lancaster, to ask, and then our libraries can help to be able to respond. Josh?
Thank you. So as in my role, I sort of lead the LGBT+ forum for the students. And one thing our students have done, sort of informally, not organised by us, is they have a book swap. So we have our weekly meetings on a Monday, and students will just bring a book with them, and then once they finish reading it, they'll just swap it with someone else, even if it's someone they don't know, and it's something that's quite wholesome. And if there are any students sort of watching this today and would like to get involved in that, absolutely, please do.
That's good. An opportunity to plug what's already going on, which is great. I'll just return back to you, Victoria, if I might, just in terms of about when you first became an ally, and I guess you perhaps touched a little bit, but the level of which it was a conscious decision and what the implications of that were.
Yeah, it's hard to think. It certainly is something that's always been kind of part of my way of being, so to speak. I think I was made aware of something called social justice sensitivity, which can be linked often to neurodiversity, which really kind of resonates with me, where you kind of feel inequality more acutely and you're more aware of it and you see these things, and it seems to impact on you. But I guess consciously, having my youngest child kind of throw the rule book out the window in terms of gender, and that kind of coincided with a lecture on gender not being a binary construct in gender and women's studies, and all of a sudden, you know, everything made sense. Maybe everybody has that kind of eye-opening experience where you have total clarity and you want to spread the word. You want everybody to know, you know, of course it's not binary. That makes perfect sense. Sometimes you get a bit of backlash from that and people aren't willing to take that on board. But I guess, yeah, the beginning of my undergraduate degree was the moment I would officially say I was an ally. Yeah.
So a number of years ago.
No. Not I was a mature student, so.
Yeah. Anybody else want to sort of say when they first became an ally or why they felt it was important? If not, we'll move on.
Can I hop in? So I am a bisexual woman. I'm cisgender, so I have always been part of the community. Within the past couple of years, a very, very close friend of mine has made the realisation that they are transgender. So I've obviously, within those last 2 years, I've become far more active and far more sort of impulsive on finding things, attending things, reading books, finding out more, keeping up on the news and all of that sort of stuff so that I can support her in her transition. But I think there's another side of this as well, to allies and parents, is that my parents, having known my close friend for a very long time, have now suddenly discovered that they are needed to show their allyship as well. And I accidentally came out as bisexual to them 2 years ago. Just by mentioning it, I thought, how have I never told you this before? It was very odd. They said, well, why are you on the LGBT network? Oh, because I'm bisexual. Oh, and that was it. That was the conversation. And then a bit of an awkward car ride later on in the week where I sort of had a discussion with my mum and she listened and she understood. And at a woman who, I hope she won't mind saying, she's retired now. She's, gone through a lot of work in the NHS and all that sort of stuff. And even now she is learning and she's discovering as a parent of a bisexual child, grown child, and as an ally to his transgender friend as well. She's continually learning there. And it doesn't stop. It doesn't just turn off at some point and go, it's not my problem anymore. It's constantly ongoing and constantly educating yourself and learning as you go as well.
Could I just add?
Please do, Brian. Yeah.
I'm just reflecting on hearing Hannah and Jo and now Victoria as well around their experiences of being a parent or parenting. But I'm really conscious that some people who are listening to this might be part of the LGBTQ plus community and not have that experience of parents who were as understanding. Certainly when I grew up, my parents, I was brought up in a very charismatic Christian Pentecostal home. To being gay was the biggest sin ever, so it was always kept quiet. I never came out. I actually got married to a woman because I was too scared to be myself and come out as a gay man. And I never had that safety of the parenthood that Victoria, Jo and actually Hannah are describing. So there might be people that are listening to this who don't have that in their lives at the moment. And I would just encourage you to reach out either to the staff network or the student network depending on your background, if that's something you need support for, I would like to chat over, because I wouldn't want us to portray a perfect picture, and I know we're not trying to do that, but there might be some people that are really struggling with that in their own lives, and that would be the time to reach out, have a discussion, talk to someone, and try and get support from the kind of family that's around you in the university community.
Thank you very much for that, Brian. You almost took the words out of my mouth, except for the fact that I wouldn't have been able to speak about it personally. It would have been sort of vicarious, as in hearing other stories. And in fact, my first introduction account of allyship was probably about 15 plus years ago, when I was at an adult education conference, and there were some colleagues from America, and there was one of the members there who was talking about some of their own work and some of the allyship activity that they'd been engaged in. And one of the things at the time was that they said, you know, actually I just make sure that there's some sort of postcard or there's something on my door, something that just sends a signal. And, you know, since then well, we can't have things on our doors now, but certainly when you come inside, I've got lots of different posters about all sorts of things. And what I find fascinating is that people will sit down and then they will often, either just before they leave, if not when they're first arriving, make some comment about the issue that is pertinent to them, whether that be to do with LGBT, whether that be to do with mental health, whether that be to do with racism, whatever, or a faith connection, whatever it is, but they use those images that are around to be able to almost say, a bit like you were saying, Jo, with the signature, there's something about it being possible to open this conversation up with this person because they obviously are okay with that. So I think, you know, so that would have been my angle.
I just wanted to add on from what Brian said, that as somebody who's come from a care leaver background as an estranged student, it's okay for our communities to not feel connected to families and parents. And since coming to university as a student, I've really made my student community my family. Like the people I lived with in first year are some of my closest friends. And it's okay to not see family as like the community you have. And I just would like to send my support to everyone going through that.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for that. Thank you.
I think that's really important. With your family does not have to be your biological family. It is your found family, as people often call it, your chosen family, the people you choose to surround yourself with, particularly as a student, as an adult. I know it can be very, very distressing going off to university and making that change. So surround yourself with the people who are going to fight your corner.
So I'm going to move on. Just a very quick question. Allyship. Do allies get a flag too? Now at Lancaster we've got lanyards which have got lots of flags and things, but do allies get a flag too?
Yep. So there is an allyship flag. You will see it quite often as a I'm going off the top of my head now. There's an awful lot of flags. We represent a lot of things in the LGBT community, thank you. So it is a black and white striped flag with a rainbow triangle in the front of it. So it's there to represent the non-members of the community standing behind and supporting the LGBT community as well. So there is a flag. There's also, I've had questions from my friends in Lancaster asking about how do they show their allyship. And it can be really hard. Quite often it's just about being there, being involved, but something as simple as a rainbow lanyard, you'll see almost all of us are wearing one today. We have little pin badges, little pin badges that say ally or something like that, that can just open up and show that you are there to have a conversation, pronouns in signatures and things like that as well. But yes, there is a flag. You won't often see it flown though, because quite often the LGBT History Months or Pride Months, we don't often want to put too much of the emphasis on the people who are outside of that community. We want to focus on the people within the community as well.
Thank you for that, Hannah. Glad I was able to.
Yes.
So, because I think actually that's one of the things, I think there are so many different flags and it can be quite challenging sometimes to remember what they all mean. So, a question for parents. Any advice about approaching a school or college to introduce a trans policy? Any thoughts about that? Whether they should, whether they might? In fact, anyone can answer that question if they've got a thought about it.
Can I come in as an ex-teacher
An
while the
ex-teacher?
parents think, because I can see
Yes,
the cogs
that's
going. So I used to teach in a secondary school in Lancaster for several years, and I would like to think that I was showing my allyship while I was teaching as well. But it can be a very difficult and very sort of panicky situation to go and speak to the schools, but the pastoral teams at those schools are there to support you, and it should be an open forum for you to have a discussion with those schools. I would say if you're not sure who to speak to school, it might be worth just trying to have a chat with their form tutor, drop them a message on the school messaging system, arrange a phone call, something like that. If your child is transitioning from different educational transitioning from primary school to secondary school, having a conversation with the school and the pastoral team that you might be choosing for your child as well is a good place to start. But ask around, open those conversations, use the school messaging systems if you can.
And I think...
I was just going to say, as somebody who's been involved in student-y politics for too long now, since high school, we, as a student council, managed to get one introduced in my high school, and most policies are found on school websites, but I'll just echo what Hannah said about the pastoral teams, and because they're only a phone call away, and lots of the policies and procedures are on the school websites. And having a look the other day to support a friend of mine who's a few years younger, they're all online now, and more schools are doing it, and schools have accreditation through various charities such as Stonewall's, which is an excellent place to start. And just to echo what Hannah said.
And I'd also just add to what Annabelle's just said in the sense that the policy, if it exists, will be on the website, almost certainly. But the other side of thinking about things is that actually it's governors who would be approving the policies within a school. So schools will pull them together and then it would be governors. So actually sometimes your governors in schools can also be sort of an avenue or an angle to be able to explore. But
I think it would be finding the parent governor would be a good place to start. I was going to suggest that when you bring these, if you'd have to bring something to a school, it can sometimes be a little intimidating if it feels like it's just yourself. So having a parent network in that way, whatever you can do to try and create that can help. And then, as you said, reaching out to someone like the parent governor might be a nice way to start as well.
Or completing a parent survey if there has been one. Again, just putting your ideas in that. Anything to add from yourself, Victoria?
I don't personally have any experience with trying to introduce policy and practice with the school. I tend to be more reactionary. Possibly, if any issues come up with my child, then I'll go and discuss that. I think communication is really, really important. But like I said before, making sure that I discuss that with my child first to make sure, they are happy with that kind of that communication with the school. They want something to happen as a result of that. So yeah, communication definitely key. Maybe finding the right people or the right parents that also align with that.
Yeah, that's lovely. Okay, so let us move on if we might. So I've got another question from online here, which is how does the panel feel about the NHS taking the rainbow flag? I can see some of our audience here rolling their eyes. So how does anybody feel about how does the panel feel about the NHS taking the rainbow flag?
Nobody wants to say anything.
Brian, I'm going to invite you
as a nurse.
All right.
With many years in the NHS. I don't feel particularly strongly about it, other than I think for members of the LGBT community, it's really important that we don't dilute the message that the rainbow flag carries. So it probably means we've got a bit more vocal work to do around what the rainbow flag means for us as a community. As I said, I was brought up in a very Pentecostal Christian home, so we always had rainbows in our house, but that was about Noah's Ark and God's promise. So when I actually moved to the LGBT community, I was so glad to re-welcome the rainbow in my life as a source of freedom, and be myself. So for me, it can be diluted publicly. That's the challenge. I don't particularly feel that I want to stand up against it. It just makes me think, what more do I now need to do to make the issues that really affect me as a member of that community and my many colleagues and allies, what more do we have to do to get our voice heard in public and in community for issues that are still a challenge?
Okay, I'll take Josh and then I'm going to move on if that's all right.
Thank you.
Just time-wise to squeeze in 1 or 2 more questions.
I was just going to sort of agree with Brian. I think it's sort of important to highlight the what the rainbow actually means, because I have found from my own personal experience, a lot of people have used the rainbow to support the NHS, but actively not support the queer community, if that makes sense. So I think if we work as a community to sort of, and allies to provide that messaging of what that flag means, I think it could sort of be used to change the conversations with the people who may support the NHS but not the queer community. But that's sort of quite a niche area.
And really quickly, sorry, that's also where the sort of the progress flag, the extra flags that you'll have seen around as well, with the extra triangles and sections on them, come into it as well, and the various flags that we have across the community for the different sections. The rainbow within the LGBT community has different symbolism behind each of the colours on there. We have a much more close connection with each of those different sections, potentially. I'm sorry, I said that very definitively then. We have close connection, the NHS don't. But it's the symbolism behind it as well, and the understanding that people have when they fly a rainbow flag, when they're showing that.
Okay, I'm going to stick with the NHS and ask Annabelle the question. We had one before the event. I live in Lancaster and have a close friend who's transitioning. They're looking for support networks outside of the NHS. Do you have any recommendations?
But Morecambe and Lancaster Pride are run by Out in the Bay, that are a great support network for the whole LGBTQ+ network, and a great resource website that I turn to quite a lot personally and professionally is Lancaster LGBT. And also for more of like the support, the events, Queer Gum is an excellent resource in Lancaster area, and there's a lot of online support for not just people in Lancaster but across, but they're the sort of places that I would go to in Lancaster.
Thank you. One starts a meeting like this and thinks, my goodness, an hour's a long time, but it's whizzed by, and we are coming, in fact, to the end. So I'm going to be handing over to Monet in a moment just to do a final wrap-up. But I think for me, I'd like to give a particular thanks to our speakers, our panel members, and I'd like to perhaps just share with you 3 L's, if I might. So picking up on Victoria's, the importance and encouragement for self-love of those who are in the LGBTQIA+ community. I think the value and importance of listening. We need to listen to one another in order that we can be respectful and supportive. And the fact that learning is an ongoing process and that we are continuing to learn. The motto of the Open University is to live and learn. My taxi driver says every day's a school day. But I think those 3 L's, self-love, listening and learning. And on that note, I'd like to pass to Monet to say a big thank you to her for all the organisation, but also for the people behind the scenes as well.
Thank you, Anne-Marie. I would like to thank everybody who has come in person and who's joined us online. I know we've had some technical issues, but I think we've managed to get through them. So after this event, you're going to get an email wrap-up of all the resources that we talked about, as well as a recording and a podcast, so that we should be able to provide you with a clean, nice, beautiful version as well. Want to thank everybody and wish everybody a very good LGBTQ History Month, and thank our panel and our moderators.